So let's talk brightly coloured war hosts, somber black guardians, and death-crazed Ynnari, with a look at some of the strongest Craftworld Eldar lists in Warhammer 40k right now. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Craftworlds, and today I thought it will be interesting to go over some of the latest innovations in army list design, and talk about what sort of Eldar lists are making it to the top tables of big tournaments and things. First up, just a quick rundown of how the faction's doing at the moment. Currently, Eldar sit at around about a 47% win percentage, certainly a fair bit down from the heights they used to be earlier in the year. Games Workshop did nerf a fair few of their units and rules. It is kind of interesting the skew within that though, because quite a lot of that is made up of Ynnari. Ynnari are sort of a bit of a hybrid, with Craftworlds being able to soup in some Harlequins dead easily and get some interesting synergies on the go. But in terms of win rate at least, they do seem to be carrying the faction slightly. Their sub-faction win rate is something like 54%, and without them, Craftworlds will be more like 45%, showing that they're a little bit more challenging to play with overall. Still though, in general, they don't seem to be doing too badly at the top levels of play. The Ynnari lists have won 4 different tournaments so far. It does probably seem like the way to go if you want to win tournaments with Eldar right now, but the others haven't been doing too badly to be honest. They have got lots of podium placings for things like Ulthwe, Scary Hail of Doom Shurikens, and Biel Tan. Overall, I'd rate them as a solid mid-tier faction that seems to do quite a lot better if played by someone who's very skilled and is good at making the absolute best out of every single unit without mistakes, but can be a bit more punishing to newer players just because their units are so fragile, and if you don't make the most out of them, they are going to get killed easily. In general, it looks like the most popular craft worlds at the moment are Hail of Doom and Ulthwe besides Ynnari. Perhaps the most typical units that are played a lot are the Aspect Warriors, Striking Scorpions, Swooping Hawks, Banshees and Dire Avengers, led by some Seers, Farseers and Warlocks, and then supported by various other bits like Webway Gates, D-Cannons, Falcons, Vipers, and Rangers in the troop slots. The Eldar secondaries I think are actually usable throughout. I don't think that there's any ones that are just auto-pick every single game unless you build for them specifically. It kind of depends on the list that you're playing and what you happen to be matching up against, and the Nephilim ones compete fairly strongly against them. Perhaps in terms of character upgrades, the Eldar ones aren't enormously standout. Maybe Seer, the Shifting Vector, might be one of the most common Warlord traits to go for though. Getting command points is nice. I thought just to take a look at some of the strongest stuff for Eldar right now would go through one list from 4 different options: Ulthwe, Biel Tan, Hail of Doom Shurikens, and Ynnari, all lists that have done well in big tournaments, and just see what people tend to be taking these days. First up we have Ulthwe, definitely an all-round strong craft world this one. It gets you a reroll, mortal wound protection, better psychic casts, and also a 6+ invul save throughout. Hard to go too wrong with all of that. Plus Eldrad Ulthwin is a pretty great unique Farseer, and he is in attendance here. And there's a stratagem for +1 to hit with Guardian units, can be nice for D-Cannons if you had them. The Warlord trait and Relic are good as well, it just is generally all-round strong. As perhaps one of the most successful Ulthwe lists around so far in Nephilim, this one's by Matt Schuckman, who used it to take second at Nova Open 2022, and is built around multiple patrol detachments, as a lot of Eldar seem to. Often there's a bit of an incentive for slightly more HQ choices, and minimising troops which are generally seen as not that strong. The list, like just about every Eldar list these days, is headed up by a couple of Farseers. Eldrad Ulthran takes Guide, Fortune, Will of Azian, and has the Fate Reader Warlord trait from Ulthwe. That manipulates strands of fate by getting you to retain an extra dice. The Farseer powers are pretty excellent to be honest. Guide gives you 4 rerolls to hit, Fortune a 5+ feel no pain, and Doom gets you to reroll wounds against an enemy. Just about any unit in the game is amped up massively by those. Will of Azian gives you Obsec and shooting while actioning, and is also backed up by a Farseer Skyrunner as well, with Doom, Ghost Walk, and Fateful Divergence, the one to farm CP each turn. The Farseer takes the Ghost Helm of Alashazia. That gives him access to the extra power, and also casts of a 9+ can't be denied, which is pretty good. There's 2 individual Warlock Skyrunners as well, one with Protect and Jinx for messing with enemy saves, and one with Quicken or Restrain. The Quicken one could be zooming very quickly over the board if needed, and I think as a character you could also use it for the Avatar of Cain as well to put it somewhere threatening, though you wouldn't be able to charge in the same turn. Speaking of which, the big boy himself is here. The Avatar is very tough and a dedicated melee monster. I think he quite likes being in Ulthwe as well, seeing as he gets the 5+ save against mortal wounds. Could be a good target for that Fortune spell as well. Finally there's Baharoth, a choice is really hard to go too far wrong with, an Obsec Phoenix Lord that jumps on and off the board dealing some hefty damage. He's pretty much a staple in just about any non-Ynnari list as well. Then moving on to the squads, there's 2 units of 5 Rangers, quite nice with their forward deploy for objectives and things, plus can be interesting for their mid-game secondary objective if they take it. There's 2 units of Dire Avengers, which I'm guessing are probably going in the Falcon Grav tanks for some first turn deep strike shuriken action. There's 2 units of Howling Banshees, both of which take Mirror Swords on the Exarchs for an ungodly amount of Strength 4 attacks. One of them takes the very popular Exarch upgrade Piercing Strikes for damage 2 on those Mirror Swords, and one has Nerve Shredding Shriek. There's 2 units of Swooping Hawks with the Las Blasters, jumping on and off the board and again being very hard to deal with while dealing some damage. Can be very nice for objectives as well if you do decide to leave them exposed. And then finally, lastly, we have 3 Falcon Grav tanks. They take a Scatter Laser, Shuriken Catapults, and one of them takes a Shuriken Cannon, and they'll quite like the Ulthwe rerolls for their Pulse Lasers. Could be an interesting choice for the automatic 6 to save as well against a big high AP shooting attack with their Invul save. That could be quite handy from Strands of Fate. Finally, there's 1 Viper with a Bright Lance and Shuriken Catapults, a fairly cheap fast mover to put on some objectives. Doesn't hurt for it to have a powerful lance attack as well. Overall, looks like a fun and well balanced Eldar list. Very fun to see the Avatar slogging up the middle of the board supported by a bunch of Aspect Warriors, and a wing of Falcon tanks as well. Moving on, we've got a Biel Tan list, perhaps the second best out of the primary Craftworlds out of Ulthwe. They get better battle focus, another single reroll a bit like Ulthwe, and they have really quite a nice Warlord trait in Natural Leader, allowing you to basically give command phase rerolls to 1 unit for 4 rerolls to hit. This list is by Brendan Weiss, who used it to take second at the Gemhammer GT. This one's a battalion, patrol and fortification detachments, so actually more troops than normal on this one. It's kind of hilarious that it looks like the main reason to spam the detachments was actually to get more HQs in there. There's 2 Farseers and 3 Phoenix Lords here. A whole load of quality characters on the table and leading a Foot Dar list into battle. Heading up the list are a Farseer and Farseer Skyrunner. The Foot one gets the command phase rerolls, which look like they'd be good on the Dire Avengers, I guess, or maybe the Howling Banshees in a pinch. He's also got Guide as well, so he can give 4 rerolls to hit for another unit too. And Will of Azian once more for the actions and OBSEC. The other one's a bit more aggressive looking. He's got Doom and has got Executioner. Jetbike Farseers can be pretty nasty with Executioner and Spite to spam out a bunch of mortal wounds at short notice. There's then a conclave of Warlock Skyrunners this time. Again, they have the same spells, Protect and Jinx, Quicken and Restrain. And then those 3 Phoenix Lords in Baharoth to jump on and off the board. And then Janezar and Karandras to lead their various aspects. Karandras is fairly brutal in combat and can set up far up the board. Janezar is very fast and can be moving very quickly alongside the Howling Banshees, and they can both give their aspects better leadership and OBSEC. They can be pretty annoying to deal with objectives as well. With this many Phoenix Lords, you could basically kind of sacrifice one and have a pretty good chance that your opponent won't be able to kill them due to their 1 phase damage rule. Could be good for doing the Eldar secondary objective where you have to take the Webway Gates and hold it in the midfield. Then there's 4 units of 5 Rangers. They look like they'd be very effective at doing the action where you scout the enemy. Some good victory points on offer there. There's a unit of Wind Riders with Shuriken Cannons. Again, could be a nice target for Guide or the rerolls. 2 huge units of Dire Avengers with the extra Shuriken Catapults on the Exarch. One takes Shredding Fire for the Shuriken effect going off on a 5+ rather than a 6, so against hard targets those ones are going to be absolutely lethal with high AP. There's then a single unit of Swooping Hawks for jumping on and off the board shenanigans. A single unit of the Striking Scorpions with their forward deploy, maybe with Karandras. They take the popular Biting Blade and Crushing Blows combo. Auto wounding with the Biting Blade attacks is great. Again, there's 2 units of 5 Howling Banshees. This time one Exarch takes an Executioner, the other takes the Mirror Swords and Piercing Strikes combo. And finally there is that Webway Gate. It means that you can get easy access to strategic reserves and have them pop up somewhere scary in the midfield. Plus it can be a target for their secondary objective. If you can hold this, then you get points. Overall, I think this is a very cool Eldar list, very thematic with the Foot Dar, and really interesting to see quite so many Phoenix Lords on the table, and in Biel Tan no less as well. I feel like you'd have to play with this very intelligently, as almost everything is fairly fragile, and you'd have to make good use of things like the Phoenix Lords only taking 3 wounds in a phase to sacrifice them where it matters. Those Aspect Warriors look like they'd be thoroughly lethal when buffed up by the Guide and Doom though. Moving on, let's talk super scary shurikens with 1 strong Hail of Doom list. Hail of Doom being the craft world where 6s to hit give you automatic 6s to wound with shuriken weapons, and those automatic 6s to wound will be at the higher AP, so shurikens just about shred most things that they're pointed at here. This one's made up of a patrol and a vanguard detachment, again low on troops here. It seems that Guardian Defenders weren't anywhere near tempting enough, and the list packs shuriken catapults and cannons just about wherever you can find them. This one was run by Ryan Olsen, who used it to take 3rd at a mid-Missouri Maelstrom tournament. and it does seem that Hail of Doom can continue to be effective, even though you can no longer combine this with another custom Craftworld trait anymore. Once more, the list is headed up by a pair of Farseers, again a Foot 1 and a Skyrunner. The Foot 1 gets Fateful Divergence and Guide, Guide being a pretty awesome spell in this one, as it gives you more chance to get those all-important 6s, and CP never hurts. The Skyrunner takes Doom and Will of Azayan, and he takes the fun combo that works quite well in Hail of Doom of the Kurnos' Bow, Relic Shuriken Pistol that deals mortal wounds, and the Mark of the Incomparable Hunter to give you extra strength on the bow, plus 6s to wounds do an additional mortal wound, which are a bit more likely with Hail of Doom, and you can potentially punch in with a Strands of Fate dice if you want to. Between this and Smite, you can be spitting out a fair few mortal wounds against infantry. Then we've got a couple of Warlocks fielded as Seer Councils this time. There's 2 on foot with Quicken and Restrain, and 2 on the jet bikes with Jinx and Protect. They very much seem to be the staple Warlock powers. Extra movement and extra toughness or messing with the enemy's saves is great. Again, there's Bararoth here as well, doing normal Bararoth things, I'm sure. Then in the squads, we've got 1 unit of 5 Rangers, unsurprisingly 3 units of 6 Dire Avengers with the extra Shuriken catapult in them. I have a feeling that they're transported in the 3 Falcon Grav tanks here, which potentially could hide off the board turn 1 and then come down with their drop pod style rules and disgorge all the Dire Avengers, giving you a ridiculously strong Shuriken Alpha Strike. The tanks themselves are no small part of the equation as well. Of course, they have their pulse lasers, but each one of these is also packing durable Shuriken cannons as well. And again, in Hail of Doom, that's just super scary. You're going to be getting more 6s with high AP. Really quite a scary Alpha Strike there. Otherwise, again, there's 2 units of Howling Banshees, this time both with Mirror Swords. One of them takes the normal piercing strikes for the extra damage. One of them takes Nerve Shredding Shriek and Crone Scream. Between the 2 of those, the first time that the squad makes contact, that will usually be an extra 4 mortal wounds on the enemy, provided you don't whiff the 2+ on either of them. Then we've got Striking Scorpions, they take the Biting Blade and Crushing Blows combo. Another nice effective Eldar damage dealer there. There's 2 units of 5 Wind Riders, again bringing loads of Shurikens. Sorry I forgot to list it here, but one of them takes the catapults and one takes the Shuriken cannons. Certainly could add to the Alpha Strike with their massive movement as well. And finally 1 unit of Shining Spears, 3 of them to also bring more Shuriken goodness. The Exarch takes a cannon, and of course are pretty dangerous in melee as well. The Exarch takes the Paragon Saber, Heart Strike, and Kane's Lance, fast moving and incredibly brutal on the charge. Finally, we've got the 3 Alpha Strike Falcons with the Shuriken cannons, as already mentioned, plus 1 Viper as well with 2 Shuriken cannons on that one. Again, pretty handy to have a fast moving expendable unit. If you like Shuriken Death, it seems like a pretty reasonable way to achieve that on the table. I feel like the big Alpha Strike of the Grav tanks is quite good fun. I feel like there's some armies that you might play against that just really couldn't take the sheer amount of damage that you could do turn 1 on fast moving things. The amount of Shuriken wounds that you'll have coming in is pretty ridiculous, and you'll be blowing away a big chunk of the enemy army on the first turn that you get to attack. Finally, last but by no means least, we'll turn our attention to the death-obsessed Ynnari, which I have made an entire video on as well. I'll link that down in the video description. This list looks like a really good example for them. It's one by Ben Jones, who used it to take second at the Hertfordshire GT. Ynnari do seem to be having the most success of Eldar these days, though I think it's partly because they can suit well with things like Harlequins and give them buffs that they wouldn't normally be able to get with their codex. Their Revenant discipline is really strong with better combat buffs, and the Incarnate itself is pretty brutal, pretty hard to take out. Its attacks ignore invul saves, and it can do teleport shenanigans jumping over the board. The Incarnate is basically an auto-include, I'd say, and sits in pride of place at this list here. It's backed up by a Farseer with Fateful Divergence for the CP, and then Unbind Souls for the 6s to hit auto wound, and Ambush of Blades, the Warlord trait that Eldar have that grants extra AP. Ambush of Blades is pretty nice in Ynnari this, as it can give things like the big Harlequin troop units extra AP on very scary weapons already. There's then a use of an Autarch here, which does seem to be a far more viable choice for Ynnari than most other Eldar. He takes a Starglaive, Banshee's Mask, and Fulture's Wing Relic for some mobility, and a Fusion Gun as well. I guess he's primarily there to give some rerolls, but is also a pretty reasonable melee threat himself. There's a Warlock Skyrunner for Protect and Jinx, and then 2 Warlocks on foot who take Ancestor's Grace. That's the Ynnari power for +1 to the wound roll, and if you put all these buffs together on one of those Harlequin units, they're just going to obliterate most things in the game. Speaking of which, in the troop section we've got 2 units of 5 Rangers. You need the Craftworld units within the slot to unlock non-Craftworld units, so that allows you to take 2 units of 10 Harlequins. They tool themselves up to the max with their scary weapons, 5 Harlequins Kisses, 2 Caresses and 2 Embraces, also allowing their scary mortal wound stratagems too. They look like the units that are going to be the focus of the buffs. Then that's backed up by a whole bunch of other Eldar, the same 2 units of Howling Banshees that have appeared in just about every list so far, 2 small squads of 5, one of them with piercing strikes and mirror swords, one with mirror swords and Crone Scream for the impact hits mortal wounds. There's then 1 unit of 5 striking scorpions. They take crushing blows and biting blade as standard, and they'll very much enjoy any of the Ynnari buffs that they have going as well. There's 1 unit of 3 Skyweavers that take the Star Bolus, 1 unit of 6 Swooping Hawks with the Phoenix Plume. They'll be able to jump on and off the board, and the Phoenix Plume gives them a 5+ Feel No Pain type save, so they're a bit tougher than normal. And then finally, there's a couple of big chunky units of support weapons with D cannons, I guess probably trying to hide somewhere safe in the backfield of the list, and put down some hideously scary damage D6+2 hits on anything that dares venture within their 24-inch range, which you're usually going to have to if you want to be taking midfield objectives and things. They're one of the few artillery pieces that's still pretty awesome, even after the barrage nerf, meaning that they're -1 to hit and AP -1 worse if they can't see their target. Overall, looks like it brings a lot of the Ynnari's scariest things to the table, the deadly Incarn, and then 2 stacked units of Harlequins to take all manner of nasty character buffs, plus some of the normal Eldar combat things that work well, and backed up by some fearsome D-cannons with a damage potential you can't really ignore. So there we have it then, 1 list for Ulthwe, Biel Tan, Hail of Doom and Ynnari. Let me know what you make of these competitive Craftworld army lists down in the comments below. As always, I fully welcome any insights or further details about the lists if you happen to know them. As mentioned earlier, I feel like they're lists that you give yourself the tools to win the game, but then it's very much on the onus of the player to use them right and not get them killed before they do their damage. So perhaps by no means easy to play, even if you've got an optimal setup. Finally, I just thought I'd mention an Eldar YouTuber who I was asked to give a shout out to by a viewer of the channel. If you're looking for some more Craftworld Eldar content, maybe check out Proxy Hammer. Always good to have a channel that's dedicated to your faction through and through. I understand that their channel got deleted recently, so are uploading some of their old content. So if there were any of you who were already following them, then you probably weren't getting as many notifications as before. Well worth checking out, I think. Looks like they're doing some tier lists for unit choices within the codex. Otherwise, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you have enjoyed this video. I'll certainly be looping back to the Eldar fairly soon with a full faction overview of them in 9th. Hopefully that one should be out within a week or so subscribe or check back later if you'd like to see it. Finally, I'd just like to quickly mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well. It is what keeps the regular 40k videos coming quite so much, so that's linked down in the video description if you'd like to help support. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.